Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're coming to you from our home studios. Want to make sure, obviously, that everyone is safe and healthy. That's the first and foremost thing. We're honored to have with us here talking about Southern Reins Center for Equine Therapy, the Development and Communications Manager, Sara Beth Raab. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Staying in place, doing well.
Hey, so Southern Reins, we've had you on our TV show, radio shows in the past. You do so much good. Really cool organization, I think, that flies under the radar. And so obviously this is our chance to make sure we lift you above and make sure everyone knows what you do. But give us a little bit of a history lesson, because obviously this is kind of an important period in terms of your growth and development. So give us a little history lesson for Southern Reins.
So we have been around for 5 years. This is actually our 5th anniversary. We started in 2015, and we started with 12 participants, and we have grown to over 250 participants this year. So we are so excited. Yeah, very big deal. We've trained, oh gosh, the number is 836 volunteers since we have started, and we have a rotating cast of at least 300-400 at both of our properties of volunteers that help us do what we do with people with disabilities.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to lead into next, is the mission and the purpose. So talk about, because obviously you're using horses, and we'll talk about the importance of that, but go ahead and dive into the mission and the purpose.
So our goal is to use horses in therapies and activities with people with disabilities and hardships throughout the Mid-South at our 2 different locations.
And go ahead and talk about the locations. Where are they physically?
So we are in Collierville, and we are at Lynch Ranch in DeSoto in Mississippi.
So you've got a good little spread there.
Yeah, we do. Our facility is beautiful. Our biggest facility is beautiful in Collierville. We have a great indoor arena. We just added some extra entrance to make it ADA compliant all the way from the front, all the way through the back. And we have some construction going on right now. So it is a wonderful facility, but we started actually in Mississippi. So when we moved to Collierville, we wanted to make sure to still be able to service our clients that are down there in Mississippi and keep them on our roster.
So talk about how this works, because we mentioned horses, but also too, a big part of this is the therapy. And there's a real power when you talk about using the animals, because there's a grace, but there's also a power. There's an ability for confidence. And so there's a lot to this in terms of the way this goes. And obviously it's a very organized and structured process. So go ahead and talk about just the horses and why that's such a powerful vehicle for creating the change. And we'll dive into the program.
Yeah, so we basically, the best way to describe what we do with people with disabilities and hardships is we have 2 programs. We have our mounted programs and we have our unmounted programs. So on the horse and off the horse for people that aren't horse people. So the mounted programs, we have the adaptive riding and then the what's called occupational therapy incorporating hippotherapy. A lot of words, but it is what you consider a therapeutic riding program. So occupational therapists, so think of a person that has a clinic and that is working with people with disabilities. What they do is they use horses. Hippo is the Greek word for horse. So they use horses within their therapeutic guidelines and use the movement of the horse, the size of the horse, the activities using the horse to help people with disabilities gain life skills, if that makes sense. So our occupational therapist is Amanda Caw. We have her, she comes to us from Le Bonheur, and she's actually dual certified at AHCB, which is American Hippotherapy Certification Board. And then she also has another certification that's a more advanced certification on hippotherapy clinical specialty certification. So she might make decisions. So if you have an individual that has Down syndrome, they have a tendency to have what's called low muscle tone. So their muscles have a tendency to be a little loosey-goosey. They have a tendency to not be as strong. So she might choose a horse that has a wider barrel, a horse that has a bigger belly. And that way it forces or it helps the individual to stretch their legs down and around the horse and gain the trunk strength that they need to be able to be stronger in their everyday life. And then, for example, someone with cerebral palsy has what's called high muscle tone. So their muscles have a tendency to be very tight. So she'll use the movement of a horse, and she might choose a horse with a narrower belly
Right.
She'll use that size differentiation to help the individual loosen their hips and to gain the strength in their trunk area. Especially people that are have to use a wheelchair full time, and maybe they're working on the skills to gain the ability to gain the strength to walk. The movement of the horse in the pelvis actually acts very similar to the movement of your pelvis when you walk. So being able to put an individual on an animal with a lot of support around them. So they might have what we call sidewalkers. They might have two sidewalkers and someone leading the horse, and then Amanda there helping them with whatever activity she has. But that movement of the horse in the walking helps their muscles to contract and loosen and strengthen so that they can then go on and gain some more life skills.
The sidewalkers are obviously a really good volunteer opportunity, because when you talk about, like you said, the number of volunteers that you're working with and training and equipping, that becomes a really big possibility right there in terms of people helping out. We'll talk about that in a second. I think it's extremely fascinating because it also too, it paints the picture of the versatility and the variety that you need within the horses to be able to do everything you do. Talk about those when you talk about the mounted and the unmounted. Dive into the unmounted kind of side of this.
So the unmounted is really interesting. So one of our unmounted programs that's very popular is the work that we do with our veterans, the Equine Services for Heroes. What's interesting about the horse and human connection in general is you have a horse, which is a hunted, and then a prey animal, which is the human. And then the dynamics between those two kind of dichotomies is what makes unmounted activities so interesting. So we all know what it's like to sit on a horse and make it go. But there's something that's really interesting in the psychological benefits of what we do is called going at liberty. So you have a horse with you, but you take them off the lead. And then now you are using your actual internal energies to help move the horse around this large arena through an obstacle course. So it's kind of like in a yoga practice, right? The yoga practice, you are increasing or decreasing your energies to influence your body and how you're doing everything. But with the horse, you are increasing and decreasing your energies to solve problems. So if someone that is working through PSTD symptoms or someone that is working through anxiety, a horse acts as a direct mirror based on how they are in the wild to what your internal energies are. It's really fascinating. There's actually a study that's going on right now to study exactly what that is internally, physiologically, of how an individual has to control their fear, anger, anxiety, or whatever is going on within them to help to influence the horse in the direction they want to be influenced. So there's a lot of interesting things that you have to know. We're all PATH certified. So our instructors are PATH International certified, which is the certification process that's very involved. So they have to know a lot about the horse, and they also need to know a touch about the individual and how they might react to the horse. So partnering individuals with the appropriate horse is super important, as well as developing a curriculum that works towards the individual's goals.
Yeah.
And with veterans, we find it doesn't feel like a therapeutic sit and talk therapy program, right? But they might have some huge aha moments in the arena that they can then take back to the VA and talk to with their psychologists, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it's extremely fascinating, both from an energy standpoint of reading energy. And obviously that's something that when you talk about from human to horse, but imagine, like you said, this research to where energy for human to human eventually, and being able to control the energy. And like you said, you don't even have to talk, and yet you can communicate through your energy.
Yeah.
The other one is, to your point about just being present. It's one thing to sit there and talk, especially for a veteran, to talk with someone, but to go out and actually like be in the moment with an animal and to be problem solving together. And let's face it, veterans love to problem solve, especially, and they love to be the hero. And this is a chance to kind of lead a horse through with just their energy. And yet that like creates a whole new set of challenges that you get to be in the moment and try to like figure out. And so I think all the way around, the way that you're healing, is a very interactive way that draws them in, and they don't even realize that they're growing and yet healing and transferring that energy. So very, very
Yeah.
cool.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because they can then take, and even any individual, when you work with horses,
Yeah.
I've always found personally that I can take almost anything that I do in the saddle into my everyday life. So if I am having difficulty with anger, if I am having difficulty with being too passive or whatever the issue is, it is mirrored in that horse. And then I get to practice it in an environment that is very low key and welcoming and kind and all of that. So it's a really interesting exercise on that specifically.
Yeah, very well said in terms of just the application of everything that you're learning regardless. So
Mhm.
share how we can help, because we talked a little bit about kind of the volunteer side of this, and obviously there's a huge need, but obviously for funding and everything that you do, that's a big piece of this. So talk about the funding and why those dollars are so important, and then talk about volunteerism.
Yeah, so we obviously, like I said, we went from 12 participants to over 250. Each one of our participants, we subsidize the cost, at least 50%. So as we grow, the more on our side, we need to make sure that, well, I need to make sure that we're staying ahead of that growth and making sure that we have partnerships within the community that are strong enough to maintain the growth. We are seeing with that growth, it's obvious that there is such a need for the therapy riding programs and unmounted programs that we provide. So having some corporate relationships is hugely important to us moving forward to continue to do what we're doing. And having individuals that are invested into our program in a volunteer capacity or in a fundraising capacity. If there's an individual out there that is really good at website development, I am all ears. If there's an individual that's really good at planting a garden, we're all ears. So we have a lot of opportunity for volunteer outreach. We have a lot of opportunity for any corporate initiatives if their brands align with what we're doing for people with disabilities or with animals, then we welcome that partnership also.
Give us maybe one, just success story isn't the right word, but just when you look at the work you're doing and the impact you're having,
Mm-hmm.
give us an illustration of a story that stands out in your mind. You don't have to name any names necessarily, but just kind of paint the picture of what we're talking about here and the power it has.
So I think one of my favorite stories is to tell about a friend of ours and a participant who is now an ambassador to a program. She has cerebral palsy and she lives in a wheelchair and spends a lot of time in her wheelchair. She started with us several years ago, and through the hippotherapy program, she gained the ability to do the everyday things that we take advantage of. She gained the ability to brush her teeth for the first time. She gained the ability to be able to brush her hair. Just like any 23-year-old, her biggest goal is to get out of mama's house and to live independently. And so through riding with us, she has been able to gain so much confidence internally. She has her own YouTube channel now.
That's awesome.
Gained so much confidence internally, gained so much appreciation for the horse, which is something that we love to share, and been able to gain life skills that have helped her to become more independent, which is the biggest goal that she has. And I think stories like that just happen over and over again. We hear stories from parents who say that the days that we do therapy are the best days for us to be able to go out to eat as a family, because then my individual with autism is calmer this day, so that we are able to, as a family, come together and go out to eat and be able to enjoy that time together. So there are so many just interesting stories from various clients of ours that are just beautiful and meaningful, and it's so much more than just a pony ride.
Give us one thing that you wish everyone knew about Southern Reins. So here's your chance to kind of like, make sure everyone knows what's one thing you want everyone to know outside of the website and social media, which we'll wrap up for in just a second.
But everything else.
What do you want to know?
So what I think is really interesting is there are some clinical studies that are going out showcasing what is being done with specifically PATH International certification instructors. And I think that is probably the thing that is most interesting. And is what we do is starting to become very, it's very unique, but it's becoming very ubiquitous within the therapeutic opportunities for people with disabilities. And I think that is something that I really want to be known and understood about the program that we run. We have a lot of programs within what we do. We don't just work with kids with disabilities. Actually, a large amount of our participants are in the older range. We work with people from nursing homes that have dementia. We work with youth villages. We work with Tiger Life. We work with SERVs. We have a lot of community relationships. And we have the ability to use horses in a large variety of ways to help individuals with whatever their hardships are and their issues are with their disabilities too. So I think that is probably the most important thing, that it is not just a pony ride, right? It's not
Yeah.
just, we're not just putting kids on horses and walking around. There's a very interesting, measurable impact of what we do for people with disabilities and hardships.
Yeah, very well said. So go ahead and wrap up and tell everyone where to go. So website, social media, phone number, where would you direct us?
The website is southernreins.org. That's REINS.org. If you're interested in any development opportunities, you can reach me at my email address, sarabeth.raab@southernreins.org. And that is, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. So you guys can find us in all the social media.
And for the listeners, Raab is RAAB. So Sara Beth, SARABETH .RAAB at southernreins.org. So make sure we get everyone to spell it correctly so they can reach you effectively. But
Yes,
Sara Beth,
great.
thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me so much.